Hello friends, welcome to our channel History Chronicles. As the French Revolution progressed, the ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity were increasingly overshadowed by violence, paranoia, and the relentless pursuit of revolutionary purity. This period, known as the Reign of Terror, is one of the darkest chapters in the history of the Revolution, a time when fear ruled the streets of Paris and the guillotine became the symbol of revolutionary justice. The Reign of Terror officially began in September 1793, though its roots can be traced back to the deepening crises that France faced in the preceding months. The young French Republic was beset by enemies on all sides. Internally, the country was racked by civil war, economic hardship, and widespread discontent. Externally, France was at war with a coalition of European monarchies, each determined to crush the revolution and restore the old order. The leaders of the revolution, particularly the radical Jacobins who had risen to power, believed that the survival of the Republic depended on their ability to root out counter-revolutionary elements both within France and among the population. They argued that extraordinary measures were necessary to protect the revolution from its enemies, and so they embarked on a campaign of terror to silence dissent and consolidate their control. At the heart of this campaign was the Committee of Public Safety, a powerful body that had been established by the National Convention to oversee the defense of the Republic. The committee, initially intended as a temporary measure, quickly became the de facto government of France, with sweeping powers to arrest, try, and execute anyone deemed a threat to the revolution. Maximillien Robespierre, one of the leading figures of the Jacobins, emerged as the most influential member of the Committee of Public Safety. Robespierre was a man of uncompromising principles and a fervent believer in the revolutionary cause. He argued that terror was not only necessary, but virtuous, a means to achieve the greater good of a just and equal society. Under his guidance, the Committee of Public Safety set about implementing a regime of terror that would leave an indelible mark on French history. One of the first acts of the Reign of Terror was the Law of Suspects, passed in September 1793. This law authorized the arrest of anyone suspected of being an enemy of the revolution, a term that was deliberately broad and vague. In practice, it meant that almost anyone could be accused of counter-revolutionary activity, from former nobles and clergy to ordinary citizens who voiced even mild criticism of the government. The revolutionary tribunals, established to try those accused under the Law of Suspects, operated with ruthless efficiency. Trials were often little more than formalities, with the outcome, a sentence of death, decided in advance. The guillotine, a device initially invented as a humane method of execution, became the instrument of mass murder. In Paris, the Place de la Révolution, where the guillotine was erected, became a site of daily executions, with crowds gathering to watch as the condemned met their fate. The terror was not confined to Paris alone. Across France, revolutionary tribunals and local committees carried out purges of suspected counter-revolutionaries. In the Vendée region, where a royalist uprising had broken out, the response was particularly brutal. Tens of thousands of people were killed in what has been described as one of the first instances of modern genocide. The countryside was left devastated, and the survivors were left to rebuild their lives amid the ruins. The Reign of Terror reached its zenith in the early months of 1794. By this time, the Committee of Public Safety had virtually unchecked power, and Robespierre's influence was at its peak. Under his leadership, the revolution took on an increasingly ideological character. Robespierre believed that the revolution had to be purified of all its enemies, and he saw himself as the moral guardian of the Republic. One of the most infamous events of the Reign of Terror was the execution of the Dantonists in April 1794. Georges Danton, once a close ally of Robespierre, had grown increasingly disillusioned with the excesses of the terror. He and his followers, known as the Dantonists, began to call for an end to the executions and a return to more moderate policies. Robespierre, however, viewed this as a betrayal of the revolution, and he ordered the arrest and execution of Danton and his supporters. Their deaths marked the beginning of the end for the Reign of Terror. As the terror intensified, so too did the atmosphere of fear and suspicion. No one was safe from the purges, not even the revolution's most ardent supporters. The Jacobins, once a united front, began to fracture as rivalries and personal vendettas came to the fore. The slightest hint of disloyalty could result in arrest and execution, and even Robespierre's closest associates began to fear for their lives. The end of the Reign of Terror came as suddenly as its beginning. In July 1794, Robespierre, who had dominated French politics for so long, found himself increasingly isolated. His obsession with purging the revolution of its enemies had alienated many of his former allies, and his control over the Committee of Public Safety began to weaken. On July 27, 1794, Robespierre was arrested by the National Convention, and the following day he was executed by guillotine. With his death, the Reign of Terror came to an abrupt end. The legacy of the Reign of Terror is one of deep ambivalence. On the one hand, it was a period of horrific violence and repression, where thousands of people lost their lives in the name of revolutionary justice. On the other hand, it was also a time when the revolutionaries believed they were defending the very existence of the Republic against overwhelming odds. The terror was, in their eyes, a necessary evil, a means of preserving the revolution and ensuring that its principles would survive. In the years that followed, the memory of the Reign of Terror would haunt France. The guillotine became a symbol not only of the revolution's excesses, but also of its uncompromising pursuit of justice. The events of the terror would be debated and reinterpreted by historians and political thinkers for centuries to come, each generation grappling with the moral complexities of this dark chapter in French history. As we conclude this episode, it is clear that the Reign of Terror was a period of both great fear and great resolve, a time when the revolution was tested in the most extreme of circumstances. The terror may have ended, but the revolution continued, and its ideals would go on to shape the future of France and the world. In our next episode, we will explore the fall of Robespierre and the events that led to the end of the Reign of Terror. Thank you for joining us on History Chronicles. The story of the French Revolution is far from over, and there are still many dramatic moments to come. Stay with us as we continue to unravel this complex and compelling narrative. See you next time.